All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Serious Angler podcast, powered by our friends over at X2 Powered Batteries. Back here with the captain, Mr. Andy Full, and as always, I'm your host, Bailey Eichbrett. Andy, thanks for holding down the fort last night while I was not feeling the greatest.
Are you feeling any better?
Uh, I'm about let's say 60% right now. I'm good enough where I got excited to do a podcast tonight. Where last night I was sitting there, I'm like, man, I want to talk about fantasy fishing, but I'm dreading getting on a podcast. I'm like, guys, take over for me. Where tonight, I was really excited to get Mr. Matt Stefan on here and talk fishing. So I'm like, you know what? My head might hurt towards the end of this thing, but we're talking fishing, so I had to be here.
Fair enough. I like it. Well,
Yeah.
welcome back. Glad you're feeling 60% better. I'll use your own words there, but
Yeah.
it's good to
I don't
have
know
you.
if it's 60, but it's better than yesterday. Just not 100%.
It's good.
We'll
Well,
meet somewhere in the middle.
continue to feel better and stop staring at computer screens all day. Probably help a little bit.
Yeah, my sleep schedule has been absolutely horrible lately, and that is to my own fault.
I'm sorry.
But, it never
Partially
fails, though.
mine.
Yeah, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Lan, my fiance, brought it up the other day. She goes, whenever we have an important event coming up, one of the two of us gets sick. Always, it never fails. Like our friend's wedding last year, my buddy came over literally for 30 minutes, and the next morning we're about to leave for the wedding. And this was, or no, maybe it was a year and a half or 2 years ago. Whatever, COVID was like peak, and
Well,
it was like
2.5 years ago. I remember this.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, by the way, I have COVID. And it's like, we're literally about to leave for this wedding. And that was like where everyone was like, oh, don't be around it, even if you don't know if you're positive or negative. It was that whole crap. So we couldn't go to that. And then she got sick like 2 days before her bachelorette party. I got sick before, well, she came home. My bachelor party was the week after hers. She got me sick for my bachelor party. It's like, now we have her best friend's wedding that she's in, and I'm sick. So she's trying to keep her distance from me. This week, it never fails, man. We never get sick outside of that. Only when there's a big event coming up.
Yeah, I feel that happens to me too. Usually, I've been around you twice in the last 3 weeks while you've been kind of sick, and I haven't gotten it yet. Thank goodness. Keep it over there. Yeah, good thing we're outside, right? Like, keep it over there. I don't want to get sick.
I think the 8-footers is what negates getting sick while we were in on Sunday.
Oh my god, that was fun.
That negates all.
Yeah, the wind, just like we could have been like hugging it and the wind would have blown whatever germs away. So
hey, we had prom pose going on a few times with those waves just so we wouldn't fall in.
Yeah, it was good. I was like, got you, buddy.
Wilson.
Yeah, that was fun. I remember going into the tournament, I looked at everyone, I'm like, be ready for 9:30, 10. They're like, what? It's gonna be calm. I'm like, what was it, 9 o'clock? It started blowing 30 out of the west, and I was like, this sucks.
This is gonna be bad real fast. My buddies were joking though, because they saw one of my tournament on Saturday when I was out in Lake Ontario. I was the only kayak angler dumb enough to go out into Lake Ontario when it was a southwest wind.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, they see this giant thunderstorm coming, and I even looked at the weather, dude, and I said, screw the weather. I even said this on my GoPro, so it'll be on my YouTube video. I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not checking the weather. I'm calling Andy. Andy will know, if I should be screwed or not, because I trust Andy more than I trust the weather.
How close was I? When I said
you nailed it. You nailed it. You nailed it. It was and my buddies are just he took a Snapchat and he sent it to me, and he's like at the thunderstorm and where I went out to, and he's like, Wilson, they thought I was lost.
It's so good. Yeah, you called me and you're like, how's it looking? I'm like, I was like, where you're at? I was like, maybe an hour and a half, and I think we talked at 11.
Yeah.
Or 11:15.
Yeah, I was like,
I was on a hike.
I'm screwed with this. Am I dumb for coming out here?
Nah. Just play it safe and get back before it gets too bad. That's all.
I did leave at a good time, but I'm also bummed because I left them absolutely chewing. And officially, so for that tournament, got the win, first win of the year. Finally, it took me long enough.
By 10 inches,
a good amount. I had 26 pounds in Lake Ontario, all smallmouth. It was freaking awesome. It was so much fun. I was telling Andy afterwards, that is exactly how I love to fish. Out deep, big smallies, big water. Even though I'm in a freaking Hobie kayak of all things. But I tied the biggest smallmouth limit ever recorded in New York from a kayak. Technically would beat it by tiebreaker, but I was with the way they were chewing and the way they were showing up on live. I would have easily had 100 inches, if not gotten myself close to 29. Not going to throw the 30-pound mark out there because that is just a taboo weight to throw around. But I would have got damn near close at the fish that were pulling in on where I was fishing. But it was just one of those things where I looked up and I'm like, dude, if I make one more cast, I'm screwed. Like, and I was in probably good 3-footers, which for you boat guys, it's no big deal, right? But in a kayak, the whole different.
Hey, listen, your kayak is almost as long as some bass boats, so
yeah, but the bass boats are 4 times as wide. Let's be real here.
That Hobie's pretty wide, bud.
Yeah. Well, either way, it was fun. Fun day catching them, and we'll talk about it more after the fact because I'm too excited for what is coming up for our show today. Mr. Matt Stefan, a new BPT qualifier. Congrats to Matt on that. We'll talk about that. We'll dive into that here soon. But 2 quick orders of business. I encourage everyone, if you guys have not checked out the Lure Lab yet, check out the episode that Matt Stefan did because we're going to dive into a little bit about that, about the hover rig in that episode, in this episode. But that is a great breakdown of that on that Lure Lab episode, as well as the the most recent episode that you did, Andy, with Brennan from Blue Molds. Talking.
Did you listen to it yet?
I've yet to.
I would make sure your brain is in order before you listen to it because it's very bland and dry, but it's very educational and it'll get everyone started to pouring their own soft plastics and like the understanding of what plastics you can recycle and melt down and repour, all the way through to how to get started and how to finish and how to make them so they last in your boat and color wise. It is really good. It's about an hour long. It's a little long for a Lure Lab episode, but there's a lot of information dropped. So bring a notepad.
Heck yeah. Last order of business, I'll make this super quick because we want to get to Matt here, is if you guys are a premium member on Omnia Fishing, there's a giant site-wide sale going on right now. And I will say, in a couple weeks, we're going to have Trevor Lowe here on the show to announce some pretty big news, somewhat maybe concerning that. You guys will have to find out when that show comes, but it's coming real soon for Omnia Fishing. Pretty pumped about it. But without further ado, let's get him on here. Mr. Matt Stefan. What's going on, dude?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Heck yeah. Dude, obviously we have so many things to get into here, but it's been a heck of a grind for you lately. We've been talking about it a little bit offline, but first thing I have to bring up before we get into our normal show cadence here. You touched on it. I'm like, we have to talk about this first on this show. But Matt Becker told us to ask you about the Sasquatch. Can you dive into the Sasquatch? What is this? What does it mean? What is the meaning behind the Sasquatch?
Yeah. Well, what he's referring to, so Matt's had the firsthand story that I think I've shared with him probably a couple of times at this point, but yeah, I had, I would call it a sighting, I guess. I don't know what year it was, probably back in like 2013. I was driving to a tournament with my team partner and we were in northern Wisconsin. We were taking some back roads to avoid to get around a little town. And it's probably 5:30 in the morning. And I made a right-hand turn onto a road, and right in the middle of the road was this big black object. And both of us at the same time said bear, because, we have a lot of black bear up here. And as we said that, this object looked over its shoulder because its butt was facing us. And it looked over its shoulder. It stood up on 2 feet and took 2 steps and was gone into the woods. Like the fastest moving big object I've ever seen. Right. And
running on its hind legs.
Well, it looked like a human running, basically. I've seen bear stand on 2 legs, but in this case it was, I don't know. It was ridiculous what we saw. And we sat there for probably a half hour, never said a word to each other. And my buddy then goes, if I didn't know better, and I just cut him off, I said Bigfoot. He's like, yeah, exactly. And
where's Brad? We need him to bring him in on this real fast. That's all I have to say.
The fun part to the story really isn't even the sighting. It's the fact that, so I had so we went and fished the tournament, and I was talking to my mom several days later, And I was like, oh, yeah, by the way, we were driving through this little town, Phillips, on the way up to the Hayward area. And I was like, if I didn't know better, I'd say we saw Bigfoot. And my mom's like, well, have there ever been sightings in Wisconsin? I'm like, I've never heard of any. And my big dumb self gets on Google and starts Googling it. And the hotbed for Bigfoot sightings in Wisconsin is right around this town of Phillips, Wisconsin, the same town I was taking back roads to avoid. And so much so that apparently they call him Big Phil. And like, that's the
Big
nickname.
Phil.
And while I was Googling it, I came across some website that took like sightings. You could report your sightings. So I reported my sighting, and that led to phone calls from the Finding Bigfoot, the TV show. They wanted to get me on the show, and like it's been nonstop. Like it pops up, every couple of years it pops up, and it's just this big ordeal. But yeah, it's just something now that people like to make fun of me. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I probably have 25 Bigfoot shirts that people have sent me, and on the wall I've got a Portlandia wine display that my boys cover with stickers, and it's just part of. I guess it's at this point it's part of me. The thing is, like, I'm not a Bigfoot guy. Like, I'm not like. I honestly, I wish I had not seen what I saw, because now, like, when I go in the woods by myself, I actually get the willies. Like, it's not something I don't know at this point.
The one thing I would probably recommend is not hunting near that town.
Well, I for sure I'm not up there. I can tell you that, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who are up there hunting. There's the thing is, there's been I don't believe it's the current owners of St. Croix. Maybe I'm wrong in this. Maybe it is the current owners, but the St. Croix headquarters are like right in that area. They're a little bit north of there, and the owners who have cabins up in that area have talked about their strange encounters before. So you can actually find other credible sources as to people that have experienced some weird things in that area. You asked, so I shared.
I love it. I'm all for it. So a good buddy of mine, Alex Rudd, he's a Bigfoot Sasquatch guy, and
is he?
I don't know if I believe it or not. I just love the idea of a Sasquatch. Like, dude, you mentioned that show, that Finding Bigfoot. I was a big like Bobo fan, where I loved watching the show just for the idea. My buddies and I would go out in our woods, like around town, and totally try doing like the tree knocking and everything they did on the show just for fun, just being kids, being dumb. But I would love to think that it's real.
I mean,
my only sightings I thought were Bigfoot were actually bears at night.
Yeah, I don't know, man. All I can say is at this point, I wish I had not seen what I saw, because I'm not a Bigfoot guy. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty common sense dude, and at this point, if they truly existed, I feel like we would have really good encounters with it. But then, like, so I would my mind tells me no, but I'm like, but I saw something, like, so. And it wasn't just me, it's my team partner. I mean, he saw the same thing. So it's not like I'm just a crazy dude. It's both of us saw the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, it's a story you guys got for forever. So
I feel like Andrew's sitting there like, who do we got a nut job on tonight?
Absolutely not. I'm trying to think, like, I personally, I do think like Bigfoot, like I'm like 75-25 that it's like a real deal. It's just because there's so many like creatures and life forms on Earth, right? Like fish, all kinds of species that they're still finding today. So who knows? Like, there's so much vast area in parts of the world that have never even been explored. I'm sure there's like parts of national parks that have hardly ever had foot traffic through, and that's where they could be. Yeah. You never know. So yeah, it's crazy to think about, but it could also be aliens, right? Like, we got a comment down here, Jeff Donnelly. The government did say aliens are real, so maybe you never know.
True. You never know.
Yeah. Maybe Bigfoot is actually an alien. There we go.
I love these things more so. I don't know. I'm always go back and forth on if I believe it or not. I more so love these things like aliens or Bigfoot, whatever, because I feel like a kid again.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think that's the biggest thing I love. Like
Something to rally behind.
Yeah, like Alex and I have literally talked about starting a Bigfoot podcast because we just love the idea of it so much. Whether we're called crazy or not, you feel like a kid. But we're not here to talk about Bigfoot on this podcast. But either way, I had to bring that up just because I thought it was very entertaining. But dude, for real, congrats on the win. I'm sure your phone has been blowing up ever since. But it's a big and it's a nice way to stamp your next chapter in getting to the Bass Pro Tour.
Yeah, it was a great end to the season. You know, it's great to have the season over with, have everything finalized, but it's also from an angling standpoint, I think you guys would feel probably the same way. When you're fishing really well, you don't necessarily want to stop fishing. So part of me wishes I had some more tournaments coming up, but yeah, it's such a relief to have qualified for the next level. It's a relief to finally have that first win off my shoulders. Like it was just a great season. Like I really can't complain. The funny thing is, like, when I look back on it, I've had so many things going on this year that I don't want to say I wasn't as prepped for the tournaments, but I really feel like I kind of, you know, I was so busy with everything going on that I showed up and really just fished more with what the lake was telling me at the time versus like my, you know, my studying of lake maps and whatever ahead of time. So I think I don't know if that's something I need to do more of in the future and just kind of stop looking and trying to get as much research as I can done. But it was just a great year. It really was.
So kind of not asking for like a full season download, but we had Keith Carson on here too to talk about something similar. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, you know, highs of the season and lows of the season. You know, highs where, you know, you kind of had, you know, hopes that it would end like this, or maybe a low where you're like, maybe it's not this year. Kind of walk us through where those were and why you thought those.
Yeah, I mean, the high was clearly the win at the Mississippi River. To have my pile of family, a pile of friends there, to do it in one of my favorite places to fish. Not that I have that much experience there, but to do it on a body of water that I just love to fish. I love the town of La Crosse. Like that was truly special. And the way that went down, like with the locks and potentially not being able to weigh in, like that, looking back on it, I would not change a thing because it's a great story. It's great. You know, it's a really good story for not just myself, but like my entire family and friends, and everyone was really into that tournament. So I love it. Now, had that gone differently, I wouldn't feel that way, but it really was a great week. The low point, the low point, I mean, when I look at my year, I had 5 tournaments. I was in the top 21. And then I had one event where I was 62nd at the Potomac River, but I was in 20th after the first day. So had I finished 42nd or higher in that event, I would have won Angler of the Year. So like when I look back on it, I really feel like that second day of the Potomac River was my bad day of the year. That's the one that really, I guess, hurt me the most. I don't know that I could have changed a whole lot. I caught a lot of keepers. I just never got the quality fish that I got the first day. And I was fishing the same area it was the first day. There were, you know, a lot of guys in that area, but a lot of guys came out of there like Keith Carson with a good bag. And so I'm disappointed with that, but there really weren't that many downfalls for the season. It was a really good year.
Was there a point in the season that when you look back, maybe a catch or a key adjustment that you made that you think, like when you look back, that really stands out to you?
Yeah, well, what the funny thing is, as good as the year was, my practice periods were terrible, like for several of those events. So, you know, I can look at many of the events, like the first one of the year on Okeechobee. I did not find the area I was going to fish till the end of the third day of practice, and having that like I only had 2 good bites in that area on a topwater bait, but I decided to start there, and that turned out to be a top 20 spot for me. Same thing happened when we went to Clarks Hill Lake. I had a really bad practice at Clarks Hill Lake in terms of any fish's size, and I just picked an area and said I'm going to go camp out in this area and really figured it out. It towards the second half of the first day of the tournament, and then had 2 good bags on days 2 and 3. And then the same thing at the Mississippi River. I mean, I had everything that I wanted to do there. All of my prior history there was pretty much wiped out by the river being at like really, really low levels, to the point where backwaters were completely stagnant water, which I had never seen out there. So I had to throw a lot of it out the window and adjust. And that really was how the whole year went. The only tournament that went kind of as planned, I guess, was Lake of the Ozarks. Because I had a really good first day, but day 2 was not good, to the point where I threw it out the window. And day 3, I went a completely different direction and ended up catching a really good bag just practicing again. So, I mean, it was a year of adjustments. That's for sure.
It seems like you have a very easy time of going into tournament day not knowing what your first move is going to be.
I'm comfortable with it at this point because I'm confident enough in my fishing ability to adjust throughout the day. The reality of it is, that's not the ideal, right? Like after 3 days of practice, we want to know what we're going to do. The funny part though is a lot of times, and I think a lot of anglers will say this, that the best tournaments result from bad practices, because you do go into the tournament still with a lot of without those preconceived notions or those spots that you're relying the tournament on, and you're fishing the moment. You're just going ahead practicing, and if you can figure it out at that point, you're fishing the freshest pattern going, and that can result in a great tournament. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but this year for me really turned out that way. Like I really feel like I was adjusting consistently.
Yeah. Was there a single bait or anything that you think that was kind of like your MVP this year?
Man, I mean, there wasn't one specific bait. I really power fished a lot this year. Lots of top waters, lots of vibrating jigs, a lot of flipping. I did use my own core tackle stuff in several of the events to catch a bunch of my fish. The only event that I really feel like I finesse fish in was the Mississippi River, where I probably should have been power fishing, or what most people would say you'd generally be power fishing. But that was the one where I kind of went the opposite direction. And but every tournament was kind of a different deal for me.
Makes sense. Yeah, that Mississippi River deal was. I remember I was talking with like Brad Rutherford and such over at Pure Fishing, and everyone's just kind of freaking out. Like, is the barge gonna open, or is the barge gonna get out of the way? Will the dam open? It was like lots riding on the line of guys being able to lock through right now.
There was a lot of money stuck up in pool 7 that needed to get back. And I'm not just talking about me. I think 5 of the top 6 guys would have been locked out. So you're talking about like the top paying spots, and standings would have been completely changed. I don't know for a fact, but one of the Major League Fishing staff members told me that the AOY results could have been changed because there would have been enough place movement that was going on. So it really would have had a big effect on not just our tournament standings, but potentially the season standings. And, for me, I had already locked up my Bass Pro Tour qualification after day 2, so it wouldn't have affected that. But it was such an emotional roller coaster because I didn't really feel like I had ever won that event until I talked to, or had a shot at winning, until I talked to Steve Lopez, who was winning the event after day 2. But he was doing pretty much the same thing I was, and in a similar in pool 7 somewhere. I know he was somewhere around me. I don't know exactly where he was, but I assumed that because he was catching the same quality fish, that he would have had 15 plus pounds, and he had a 12-ounce lead on me going into the day. So I kind of really thought I needed 16 or more to have a shot, and I weighed 15.8. So I really didn't think I had it until we were waiting outside the lock, and he came up to me and asked me what I had, and we discussed what we each had. And at that point I was like, man, I might have this, but I don't think I'm going to be able to weigh the fish in. So it was like, man, I've got enough weight, but I'm not going to, nobody will ever know that, like, this is my chance. And, there's a lot of negative thoughts that go through your brain when that's happening. And, it worked out. It worked. We made it back. It worked out. But I think if you were to ask all of us at 2:00 when we have to be back at 2:30 and the barge is still sitting there in the lock, that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's the frustrating part about it. From my point of view, is when it's out of your own hands. Like, I feel like I would rather lose from my own hands, my own doing, than something I can't control. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, a lot of what I was actually trying to think about was like, how am I gonna explain this to all of my family and friends that are on that dock, thinking he's got enough weight to win this? But like, I mean, there's a big part of me that would feel like I let them down because I made a bad decision to stay up there. And I don't know that I'd have any more control over it than another situation, but it really was like, how am I going to take this? Like, am I going to quit fishing after this? Like, am I going to be done? Like, I've had enough close calls, and this would be the worst way to cap off another.
Kick you down while you're waiting, right? Like, just keep kicking you down.
I feel like I've had 5 other professional level tournaments that I've had the fish on to win, and I did not execute. And then in this case, to have the fish in the live well to win, but then not be able to weigh them in.
Yeah.
It would be like a kick to the crotch. That's all I can say.
Guys hate me.
External force is just all against you at once. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you had tried to go back sooner and say lock down sooner, would you have had the weight you had? Like, did it make a difference that you came down?
No, well, yeah, actually, I did cull one. So we all thought we could fish till about 1:00 ish, which is an hour and a half before check-in. There was what happened with the barge is the barge that actually caught us in the morning. So we had about a 2-hour delay in the morning. And Sheila K. Barger was the barge's name. She locked from pool 7 into pool 8. So we all saw that on our apps, and you can track that barge moving. Well, that barge must have gone somewhere in the near vicinity of the dam. It unloaded one container of its 6 and then came right back to lock up to pool 7, which is not generally what happens. Generally, I mean, they go one direction and they could be going to the Gulf of Mexico for all we know. But because we weren't checking our app until like 11:00, at that point, the barge had unloaded and come back, and it was sitting right below the lock, and it was staging to come up, basically, is what it was. But when you check the app, we all saw it below the dam, still sitting where we left it in the morning. So we just assumed it tied up like a lot of barges do. They get some sleep and then they continue on. And so we weren't expecting that by any means. And could I have tried to lock back? I think I would have had to lock back before 11:30. And at that point, I probably would have had at least one cull. Whether that cull helped me about a half pound. So I don't know that it would have actually changed the winning weight, or changed the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have changed it. I mean, that's the funny thing about all this right now. There's part of me that questions, had that barge not been there, maybe I wouldn't have won the event, because Steve could have got to fish, or one of the other guys could have fished for an extra half hour, an hour, and maybe would have culled up and actually passed me. So it's hard to say at this point. I don't feel like I would change anything about how I approach that. The crazy part really is the fact that all of us that were going to pool 7, we had a barge every morning And in the afternoon, we had barges that were coming down that we had to lock back by about 12 or 12:30 to make sure we got through before they got there. So we, by the time we were fishing about 9 a.m. every morning and we were leaving by like noon. So to get the weights that we had is really impressive in my opinion, because we were only fishing for 3.5 hours a day in the areas where we really wanted to fish. I mean, I never caught a way fish anywhere outside of my main stretch of grass in Pool 7.
Dang. So how much time did you get back? Well, how much time was left when you got back to the dock? Like
by the time on the final day, we got back with about 5 minutes to check in. So, I mean, which in tournament world is not that close, but it really is when you're talking about a locking process in between. So and it's also, it's only, I think, like 4.5 miles from the lock to where our takeoff was. So it's not like, the issue was the lock. It wasn't the running time by any means.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that could take one chatty Cathy of a, lockmaster, and you guys are showing up late. We have a funny count from Andy Leonard here. Did the lockmaster get a box of jerky sent to him?
The lockmaster, I can tell you, I did not send the lockmaster anything, but I can tell you the lockmaster ate a lot of meat products that week with myself and Steve Lopez, who's sponsored by another meat brand. So it was like they were getting product in the locks. I can tell you that. You want to keep the lockmasters happy. The last thing you want to do is piss them off.
Yeah.
Here comes this guy. We're gonna race up half the speed.
Yeah. Oh, the doors just broke. It's going to be 2 hours while we fix it. And it's like, did it really break, or are you just toying with us?
Door is jammed.
Well, we're going to lunch. See you guys later.
Like they, their job is to get commercial traffic up and down the river. So like every time I'm on the river, I always feel like the bass boats are just kind of like the bees around the hive. We're just buzzing around and we're just in the way. And when you have a big tournament with 150 guys, there's a pile of guys that are calling the lockmaster like, is there a barge coming? Isn't there? Like, and they do not enjoy that. That just interferes with their real line of work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine how many calls they get on normal circumstances like that. That's got to be absolutely insane. But so I mean, now that qualify for BPT, we were talking about a little bit of boat stuff here offline before we started the show, but have you started your prep or anything of like that for next year?
No, I got an email yesterday with the official invite, saying that I officially was in. I really don't know what to expect. I haven't really, we don't know what the schedule is. I don't know from that standpoint. I haven't really sat back and looked at, anything regarding the Red Crest qualification that I have. It's, I got to really dive into the rules and make sure that I'm familiar with the rules, because there's a bunch of different rules with respect to it. But no, I haven't, the last 2 weeks have been so busy with kind of catching up on stuff. My entire month of July was really busy to begin with, with ICAST and tournaments. And I had a family vacation where the last thing I really needed to do was win an event, because it just set me back that much further and a bunch of things I was trying to do. So the last 2 weeks have really been straight catch-up time. And from that standpoint, it's kind of now starting to move into, okay, I got to start prepping for next year, whether that's the business side of things with sponsors and boats and all of that, as well as just kind of getting familiar with the rules. And hopefully we get a schedule sometime soon. That would be nice, so I can kind of start planning around that. But I'm still just kind of trying to enjoy the taste of victory, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fresh for sure.
Yeah.
Now you just have to win another one next year, right? Like, you just jump into the next one.
Man, I'm hoping it's kind of that wave. You see some guys get that first one out of the way, and it just is like dominoes. That would be amazing. And I don't I'm kind of surprised it took me this long. I mean, to be honest, like I really felt like I had a lot of good opportunities. I've had a lot of, I've consistent enough where I feel like I've put myself close enough to be in contention and just haven't capitalized. So to have it is great, but it, I want more at this point. I want them to keep coming.
Absolutely.
You want that fire to stay lit for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, have you had any time to think about like not just the business side, but like you fishing wise? Like, are you going to adjust anything, or is you just kind of keep steady flow of your process?
Yeah. One thing that I always try to evaluate my seasons and things I can do better and things that, I need to work on. But one thing that I really feel like happened this year, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, was like how busy I've been, whether that's with core tackle or YouTube content, fishing tournaments. I'm so fully submersed in the fishing industry right now that like everything I do is fishing related, and I'm always thinking about different things. So from that standpoint, I feel like that's really kept me at the top of my game, even though it's not all necessarily on the water, but it's just continuously thinking and talking about fishing versus, in the past it was a lot of, okay, I'm gonna prep for this tournament. But now, now it's like, okay, I'm building rods for specific tackle, and then I'm building tackle. And it's like I feel like I'm so in tune with how little changes can affect certain things that it's just helping my fishing performance overall. But to answer your question, like I don't really feel like I need to change anything. I just want to keep the momentum going of all these different fishing related endeavors, and I'm hoping that continues to relay into really good fishing on the water.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and from regards to style, back when it was the old format, there was an adjustment. There was something to change from the BPT format when it
Yeah.
was, everything over 2 pounds or whatever they'd have it for location. But now that's the same 5 fish. There really isn't much you have to change. It's just going to be different in regards to days. It's going to be longer.
Yeah, just a little different from that standpoint. But I mean, I'm basically trying to catch 5 big fish and I release them on the spot. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. So I don't think that there's going to be, if I do anything, it could be maybe a little bit of research in terms of trying to figure out like what weights are needed to advance to the next round. Like, I've always kind of been more of a guy that likes to keep the gas, the throttle on the gas. And in this case, maybe that's not what I want to do. If I feel like I'm really secured in the top 20 to move to the next round, maybe it's about, okay, there's no reason at this point to try to upgrade, in normal tournaments. Yeah, if you've got a good bag, but if you can upgrade still to an even better bag, that just makes it harder for other people to catch it. But in this case, you truly could just be burning fish for further days.
Yeah, like there would be no point, and you're hurting yourself. Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense. I had a question and I totally just lost it. But it was going to pertain to with the off days. Is that something you're looking forward to, or is that something where you're like, if you had full steam on one day and you're like, oh, I just want to get back out the next day, and you see conditions aren't going to be right, in 2 days?
I'm, I fished the Lake St. Clair event 2 years ago. I finished second at the St. Lawrence River for a Major League Fishing Pro Circuit event at that time. And they took the top 4 into the next BPT event. So I have fished the Lake St. Clair one 2 years ago, and then our title championship 2 years ago as well was under that same format. So it's something that I'm familiar with. There's things that are really nice about days off, and there's things that are not great about it. Ideally from an expense standpoint, it is just additional travel, and you're renting houses or hotel nights, additional nights. So it is more expensive to do it. There are things though that are nice too, in terms of, working on the boat, working on the tackle. I can do sponsor things. What I would really like to do is try to get my family to travel with me to a couple, because if you've got those off days, if we went to a place like the Kissimmee chain, you've got Disney World right there. Like, you could go spend some good family time too during the middle of the tournament. So I'll, when the schedule finally comes out, I'll take a look at it and see how it falls. But, if I could choose, I probably would say I'd rather not have an off day, but it is what it is.
Yeah, man. Off days, man. You could take the kids Bigfoot hunting.
That won't
sound like something.
Yeah. Yes, we are full-time fisherman, part-time Bigfoot chaser.
Yeah.
It sounds like Bailey's just trying to invite you on as the third host to his and Rudd's Bigfoot.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I'll leave that. I'll leave that up to you guys. You guys sound like you can cover that just fine on your own.
we got 2 nut jobs. I don't know if we need a third. Just kidding.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's funny. But dude, I mean, it's got to be pretty exciting though. Are you gonna try to fish the invitationals as well next year? Or are you just gonna try to focus solely on BPT?
Yeah, I'm gonna consider it. I would be surprised if I end up fishing the full season, unless they have some sort of championship, if they make some changes to it. But I could definitely see myself jumping in a few if the scheduling works out. If I'm starting the season on Okeechobee and they're the week before or the week after on Toho or someplace that's on my way back, I would definitely consider it. But until we have the schedules, I won't know. I mean, the priority for sure is going to be BPT, but
right.
I really thought the invitationals this year were a very good tournament circuit. Like, I did not expect them to be run as well as they were and to be as well received as they were. And MLF did a great job running them. So I would definitely consider fishing them. I mean, I've heard rumors there might be some changes to payouts and that type of thing. And, if they're, if they're positive changes, that makes them better. If they're negative changes, it probably makes me not want to fish them as well, because even though there are some big payouts to be had, and I had a very good year from an earning standpoint, the reality is, they're just like the opens. If you break even, you're coming out of there with a good finish, but you just broke even.
Right. Yeah. Now, money aside, I mean, invitational wise, what additions or changes would you like to see, like a championship or things of that nature?
For the invitationals?
For the invitationals, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a championship is a must. I mean, it really bothers me when we don't have a championship for any of these multi-tournament circuits. Like the Bass Opens, in my opinion, you're asking guys to fish 9 events. There should be some form of championship or at least Angler of the Year payout for guys that committed that much time to it. The same thing for the invitationals. You're going to fish 6 tournaments, travel all over the country. When I go back and look at the results in the payouts, I mean, there's guys in the top 20 that did not win back their entry fees, let alone their travel expenses. So, when you look at it, the championship has always been an event that really helped guys generate income from the tournaments themselves, because there was no entry fee and it was show up and you could finish last and you still were walking away with $10,000 in your pocket. And that's kind of a lot of times what made the season, when you looked at just payouts to entry fees and didn't take into account like sponsor dollars or anything. So for me, that would be the number one thing. I think that would be a huge ordeal to get a championship back. Other than that, I would love to see a better risk reward ratio from a payout to a entry fee to payout ratio. The invitationals were paying 80%, which, when you compare it to, say, the opens, it's better than the opens, but that's still a hefty membership fee, which is what I like to call it. I mean, it's a $5,000 entry fee. That means $4,000 is coming back to the pot and $1,000 is going to running the tournament. And that's a lot to be taking from a $5,000 entry fee.
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm not necessarily saying like these organizations are just claiming that money. I mean, it may cost that much to run the tournaments. The reality is, from a business standpoint for the anglers, it's tough to make a living when you're not fishing for even your full entry fee.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and not having the championship, it's like you don't have something you're looking forward to. I mean, I understand that you're competing for the BPT spot, but I totally get your point there. That makes a lot of sense.
There's when they ended the season in lacrosse, I mean, there's a lot of guys from down south that don't want to drive all the way to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And
That's
if
a heavy
you're not
lift.
if you're not fishing for a championship and you're not fishing for, if you don't have a shot at being in the top 8 for BPT, there's a lot of guys that dropped out. Now they were able to fill those spots, but there were still a lot of anglers that were registered for the full season that did not compete in the last event. And anything you can do to retain those anglers is a bonus. And that's where you're talking about better payouts and championships.
Makes sense. So off season, I'm sure you're probably going to be going some heavy core tackle stuff. Is that going to be ramping up while you're getting prepped for next season? Is it already full swing ahead?
Yeah, we're full swing ahead at this point. We've got I've probably got 7 or 8 different prototypes I'm working on, different different designs. Some of them are pretty much ready to go. Some of them we've put into production. Others I've got like this grand idea in my head and I just can't figure out how to make it happen. So, the reality is at this point, we've been extremely well received. The feedback from the anglers regarding the 2 products that we have out, the hover rig and then the ultimate swim bait head, which we refer to as the tush. Those two have been phenomenal. I mean, they're the top 2 selling terminal tackle items at Tackle Warehouse right now. So they've been received well. So we're continuing to come out with additional sizes of both of those. Have weedless versions, non-weedless versions. And then, like I said, I've got these other designs that some of them ready to go, some of them aren't, but they're all very unique in their own right. And, our approach is we try to take certain techniques and kind of change them to hopefully fix some of the problems that we see with them.
Yeah, I've been playing with it. I've only been out a couple times where I exclusively tried to only throw that and learn it. And I took it to, Andy knows, I took it to a fishery that has a lot of numbers, but it's hard to get big fish to eat. You see them, but it's hard to get them to eat. And there was no problem getting them to eat on the hover rig. It was pretty cool to see the difference it made. I mean, I have a lot more I want to do with it, but it was pretty. I was thinking about just because I've watched your videos on it, watched the Lure Lab episode on it, and I'm thinking about like the presentation of you could do certain baits, and there's no other way, like rigging wise, to make certain baits act the way they do.
Yeah, it's been really cool because with the hover rig, we've been able to basically take a lot of standard plastics that have been around for a long time and give them a little bit of new life because they can be presented in a completely different manner. Mm-hmm. And it's cool too, because you can fish that thing basically from the surface all the way down to the bottom and suspended in between. So it's such a new technique for all of us. I really feel like the hover strolling technique, which is what we designed that around, can be fished in so many different ways. And I really feel like it's kind of untouched at this point too, and untapped, I should say, in that I think there's going to be a lot of specialty baits that probably are developed for this type of rigging. We're seeing several other companies now coming out with very similar style hooks. I feel like it's here to stay. And I really think it's a fish catching machine myself. So mm-hmm. I'm excited for it. I'm excited for that technique. It's been a huge opportunity for core tackle because it's kind of allowed us the ability now to pursue some of these other baits and designs that we wanted to take on as well.
Yeah. We have a question here from Brown Bait Co. Brendan over there asking if we'll see a 12-aught hover rig or 12-aught Tosh. He's a big swim bait guy, hence why he's asking.
Tush.
Yep.
Big old tush.
Yeah. Not in the near future, but I know he's got the big old swim baits. I'm a big musky guy, and we've already discussed this. Like, it's not like
Damn.
we haven't. It's more of before we get to what I would like. It's already a niche market. That would be very much a niche size, and I could definitely see us doing it. I don't think it'll be this year. That's for sure.
Right.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. You gotta
It's a
watch
lot of
where you
lead.
can run.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a
a
lot.
big hook and a lot of lead. But there's applications for sure in the bass market too to have that. It's just one of those. It's a very specialized field at that point.
Mhm.
That would a specialized angler that's going to be using those.
For sure. So if I'm not going to ask you to give up any secret juice that you don't want to give up, but if you had to take 2 baits that are your favorite to
That's a
put
good
on that
question.
hover rig, what 2 are you going to take?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on species.
Okay.
I'll tell you, right now, I started my main bait that I designed it around was the 4.25-inch Berkeley Max Scent flatworm.
Mhm.
And so I love it with that. I love it with the 4-inch Kitech Shad Impact, which is a great bait. You can actually get the bait almost to vibrate like a lipless crankbait. And then lately, oh man, I've got the Bass Tricks Flash Tricks is an amazing bait on there. The Jackal Rhythm Wag is another really good one. It's honestly, it's one of those things. It's hard to find a bait that doesn't act differently. Like if you're talking the bigger sizes for flipping, the Berkeley Max Scent Creature Hog. I mean, that's what I had a top 20 on at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, flipping that thing around, and it's just and that's kind of what I meant before about it being somewhat untapped. Like there's so many baits out there that have never been tried on it. I'm sure that there's a lot of opportunity there for people to uncover some hidden little gems. But those 4 or 5 that I rattled off are ones that I have on all the time.
Yeah. From watching your content, you sold me on the Creature Hog with that thing. And I went and I filmed some underwaters with it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's
so freaking cool.
the cool thing with some of those creature style baits, they glide really well in the fall, but it's actually when you like snap it off the bottom, and instead of the bait coming up, it actually, because it's a 90-degree hook, it actually darts, like stays close to the bottom, but skitters left and right. And that's, in my opinion, a very good way to trigger a reaction strike from the fish.
I noticed that. And I noticed there was one time I was watching on live where these fish were a little bit deeper on a tree where I threw that with the Creature Hog. And I noticed the Creature Hog did exactly what you meant, where it could almost walk side to side.
Yep.
And I was reeling the bait back and they chased it up and they wouldn't eat it. So I started knocking the slack and started walking side to side. And that's when I ate it. And I'm like, this has opened up a whole new can of worms right now.
It really is. Like I just feel like every time I go out, I try to try different baits. I try like different retrieves, and it can be used from the surface to the bottom. Like it can 30 foot of water, you can fish it in 2 foot of water. It's really it's a change of pace. I really feel like in 5 years when guys are like, yeah, I'm finesse fishing with a drop shot, a wacky rig, a hover rig, like a Ned rig, it's going to be right in the middle of it. I expect it to stick around at this point.
I think so. It's definitely one of those things. When you look at it, it's like intriguing. But I think once people can see what it does underwater, that's when you kind of get, which I think would be interesting. Over time we see these ebbs and flows of the fishing industry from a tackle standpoint. Like, we see like the reemergence of spinner baits where they kind of died off for a little bit. And I wonder if this is something that's going to be so crazy where, in 10 years, the Texas rig becomes a little bit better, or then it'll go back. You know what I mean? Like
the cycles, the ebb and flows.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it that's what happens in the fishing industry. So I mean, if that were to happen, I think it would be amazing, amazing for that hover strolling technique and the hover rig. And I think it's sticking around. I feel like it's really is kind of an advancement on a jig head, and I'm not just saying that because I designed it, but I feel like the jig head had been so stagnant, right, for a while. You know, it's here's a ball of lead and here's a hook coming out of it, and this is a little bit different. And I really feel like it's going to open up a box of worms, and you're going to see a lot of people kind of exploring different ways to manipulate hooks, really is what it comes to.
Well, I am extremely excited to see what you guys are working on right now, because I feel like so many people are like, oh, innovations is dead in fishing tackle. And maybe a year ago, I probably would have agreed with it. But what you guys did just from a simple rigging aspect with a jig head, I feel like I was like, oh crap, wonder if you could do this now. Like no one really thought of it that way. And I'm sure you guys are way down that train.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're going. I mean, you know, the core tackle name is a lot of that is based off of like the coreness of a bait, right? Like the body of the bait. And there's not anything we're working on right now that's like anything else, I guess, that you could say. I mean, everything is not that it's like super craziness, but it's a lot of it is just like Johnny Schultz and I are tackle tinkerers through and through, and we've been doing it for a long time, and we just never had the outlet to actually try to produce anything. So we're bringing back, we're bringing, you know, we're trying to create ideas that some, you know, between the two of us, we've had for a long time. And I don't think we're doing anything crazy. I just feel like we're thinking outside of the box and not looking at what's out there right now to come up with what other people are doing.
Well, and I think that is the unfortunate thing of fishing tackle nowadays, is that thinking outside the box is thinking about not copying something else.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we definitely see a lot of it going on, and it doesn't necessarily help the innovation aspect of things, like you said. I mean, and we don't want to be doing what other people are doing. I mean, we're really just trying to make baits for us. And then if we can sell them to help fund our own love affair of our own baits, that's what we're after. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, for all I know, core tackle, maybe it'll be kicked to the curb in a couple of months and we were just a fad. But I really feel like we've got some staying power, and we're trying to grow the company. The thing is, you know, it's not like we can just produce every idea right off the bat. We want them to be well thought out, well tested, and in order to come to market with it, it's not necessarily a cheap endeavor either. So, you know, to do it all is a slow process, but we want to do it the right way. You know, we don't want to just kick a bunch of crap out there.
It's not you guys that's pouring all those, is it?
No, we've got a major production facility doing it in the US for us. That's actually, they've been amazing to work with, like to help design a lot of the stuff. You know, some of the stuff we've designed right here in the basement, and then you take it to them and you basically say, can you make a mold for this? But they've been amazing to work with, and it's really been more of it's just a slow process. I mean, you know, between getting molds made and testing, and, you know, you got to test it. You got to make sure it does what you want. And I mean, just with the couple that we came out with, they look so simple, but guys, I'm telling you, we had 4 prototypes of the tush and 3 of the hover rig, you know, so to go back and forth, you're talking months of testing back and forth, and it takes a while to get the molds. And, you know, and maybe we didn't necessarily need to do that, but we wanted it to be how we wanted it to be. You know, I didn't want to look back and be like, I wish we had changed this.
Yeah.
If it's not perfect, don't release it.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how, I mean, I think that can kill you to a point too, but it really, if you're going to make the change, do it during prototyping versus in production phase.
Yeah.
That makes sense. For sure. Andy, you got anything left for Matt here? I could talk this specific hover rig for hours.
Yeah.
But you got anything left for Matt before we hit him with the last question of the night?
No, I love how you want to talk the hover rig, and I it was one of the coolest episodes I think we've done on the Lure Lab, and it's something that I always look at. And I'm like, I need to go out and fish this more. My issue is I have trouble time fishing because I've mostly been guiding. So it's something that I have tied on when I go out fun fishing, and then I end up just graphing for like 6 hours half the time. So I don't even make a cast. So it's like, but no, it is a cool thing. It is here to stay. I think it's going to catch on more and more as you go. And the trouble is, like you said, it goes in cycles, right? Like look at the bladed jig. 10 years ago, nobody was throwing the bladed jig. And now everyone throws a bladed jig and nobody throws a spinner bait. So it's, it'll be cool to see the cycle of it and all the innovation that you guys have coming. The tush rigging option is a really cool one. So I like seeing the videos of that one.
I think what he's saying, Matt, is we need a 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce hover rig so we can use it like in 50 feet of water on the Great Lakes.
we got some bigger ones coming.
Let's freaking go. There you go, Andy. There's your solution.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, guys. I love coming on, and I could talk tackle tinkering way too long too.
Yeah. Well, that's what your YouTube channel's for. So if anybody lives under a rock and isn't subscribed already, highly encourage you to. It's whether you're listening or watching, it's in the show notes. You guys can go right to his YouTube channel, subscribe, and learn a heck of a ton. I certainly binge off of it and have found some things that have been really freaking cool, like the hover rig, from watching the content. Yeah. So
I think that's where I first learned about it too. And I was like, ooh, what is this thing? Like, you put out a video on it, like 8 months ago, I think was like the first one, or even a year ago.
Yeah. So the production model came out in February, but I was doing videos on it like while I was testing it back in probably October.
Yeah.
So a long time
ago.
Your videos have bounced around our group chat a few times. We've been tinkering in our minds for good reasons. Yes.
For us, you never know. Don't let them lie to you. You never know.
We only talk bad about Andy. Don't worry.
I mean, this is the best part about YouTube is meeting guys like you and doing this stuff. Like we're all just fishing nuts, and we love to talk fishing. So without YouTube, we wouldn't be doing this. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And for me, from a brand standpoint, YouTube has definitely been. I mean, it's been probably the best thing for my career in terms of really bringing everything together. It's allowing me the opportunity to do core tackle. And I kind of feel like it's been really good.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that you and Johnny are taking the reins or have the reins on that, because it's two mega minds that are very creative and thoughtful. I mean, you see the content that you guys come up with. You can see the imagination there. You can see the creativity. And obviously, if you have to do YouTube and do it successfully, you need to have the work ethic to do it. So I think it speaks for itself why it's doing so well. But our last question for you of the night, that Andy, we haven't been able to ask this in.
Oh, it's been so long.
It feels like a long time. We've had some. We always ask this for people that are new to the show, their first time on the show. That's when we ask it. We haven't had a new guest in a minute here. And that is
loaded. Absolutely loaded.
No preparation. We throw it to the fire. That is, if you could sit down, have a steak and a beer with 3 different individuals. Doesn't have to be fishing. If you don't want it to, they could be alive 1,000 years ago. It could be Sasquatch, whoever you want it to be. Steak and a beer. Who would you sit down with and pick their brain?
Man, that's a good question. You're putting me on the spot right off the bat. I would one would probably be Kevin Van Dam, just because he's one of the few guys I've never actually really talked to in the fishing industry, and I would love to have his full take on it. He's seen it all, so I would, and I know that's kind of like he's the guy of the moment at this point, but he's definitely somebody for me from my career was very, very early on. He was a big influence for me. So I would love to talk to him about the fishing world. Mm-hmm. Man, who else? There's a lot of people. Who I'm a big fan of? Joe Rogan. I would love I would love to talk to Joe Rogan, like not on a pod. I mean, I'd love to do it on a podcast, but I think he would be a really good one just to engage in. He always plays. I think he plays down how intelligent he actually is, and from that standpoint, I just feel like I would be blown away by him at a dinner. Give me one more. I'm trying to think of. This is one I wish I had some time on because I feel like there's so many people out there I would love to have a dinner with.
Well, why do you think of the third one? When you mentioned Kevin Van Dam and his take on like fishing, like the industry in general, one really cool thing, and I'm spoiled with my job, and Matt, I work with Pure Fishing, do the PR agency. We also have Johnson Outdoors, and therefore Kevin Van Dam's on there, and I get to talk to him every now and then. But one of the cool things that I learned is when they went on a shoot, when they were coming out with Target Lock, is they had Kevin and Carl on the same boat. And my buddy Luke over there at Johnson Outdoors was telling me how like Kevin's never thrown glide baits before, and people that know Carl loves throwing glide baits. Yep. And Kevin was like a kid again, like a student asking a million questions, like barely giving Carl time to answer because he was asking the next question because he was so curious where to throw him, how to throw him.
5 questions ahead before Carl could answer.
Yeah, and just like exploring glide bait and these bigger swim bait fishing, and it was like cool to still see how he might be retiring, but that fire is still there. I wanted to share.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you run into that with a lot of anglers. Like the truly passionate anglers about the sport are the ones that want to keep learning. Like it's funny because I've got a 7-year-old, my little boy Hank, and he reminds me so much of myself as a little boy, like who was head over heels in love with fishing to the point where it's annoying. Like I remember, as a kid, always like, my whole family kind of fished. Like we would take these 2-week-long vacations, would be to northern Wisconsin. We'd go to a fishing resort, and that was our fishing for the year. It wasn't like I did a lot of fishing, but like while we were there, my grandpa would come in, my uncle would come in, my dad would come in, and I'd ask him 100 questions. What'd you catch it on? What color? Where were you? How deep? Blah. And to the point where it was always kind of like a joke where in hindsight, I recognized they were kind of making fun of me because it was like, oh, here comes Matt with the questions. And I kind of annoyed him. But I recognize it now because I see it in my little boy because he's the same way. Like he just doesn't stop with the questions. But there's something special about somebody being passionate about something, whether it's fishing, whether it's cars, whatever it is. When you see somebody that's really passionate about what they're doing, like to me, that's very motivating. Like that's it's an awesome thing. And I would kind of expect nothing else from somebody like Kevin Van Dam, who does what he does, to be firing off questions about something that he's not familiar with. Because that's what we do. Like I'm the same way. I know I annoy the crap out of people. And the funny thing is, like my previous job, I was a financial investigator. So I would review trading activity and basically interview the traders that made the trades and ask them question after question after question. So I have a lot of training regarding how to question people. So I relate that back to fishing, and it's
training
like
questions.
It's just like question after question after question to get to like drill down to the answer that I'm looking for. And I annoy the crap out of people with it because I just don't like let something go. But for me, it's like I need those details to move on. So like I don't know. It's
That's awesome.
We're all crazy. We're all chasing little green and brown fish. I mean, we're all doing this for something that's so unimportant in the world when you think about
it. Ain't that true?
So you're in the dark room with a lampshade pointed at their face. Like, tell me your darkest secrets.
I mean, it kind of was like that. I don't miss it at all. That's a hard thing to do, is like tell somebody they've been committing some sort of financial fraud. Like that was part of the reason why I quit the job, because it got to the point where it was a little too stressful.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. It's a really great message. And it was actually pretty cool. On Saturday, we were at awards for that tournament. And there was another guy that fishes our trail who I'm friends with, and his kid came up to me. Apparently, his kid watches my personal YouTube channel all the time, and he was like, how are you learning some of this stuff? And one of the best advice I've always gotten to me, and it rang, and it's very similar to this, was always be curious. And it's funny because I saw that clip. I've never watched the show, but somebody sent I think it was my dad that sent me the clip from Ted Lasso with the throwing the darts thing. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Where he's like, always be curious, not judgmental. But I always thought that always rings true. Like, as long as you're always curious in fishing, you're always going to keep learning.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I don't know if the kid understood what I meant by that because he kind of just walked away and rolled his eyes. But I thought that was cool. Yeah.
What?
Like, I just want waypoints, bro. Well, sorry, Matt, your last one, your third one.
I'm going to throw a weird one out there. I'm going to say Al Capone.
Oh,
I would like to hear the stories from Al Capone's era, and not necessarily like a lot of people are going to be like, that's a weird thing because he's a gangster. I'm not necessarily as into the gangster side of it, but he was a huge fisherman, and so there's one story I want the answer to. So I mentioned before I like to muskie fish, and being that I live in Wisconsin, the muskie is like the fish up here, and there is stories that depending on what fish you consider to be the world record, there is one though that Louis Spray, who's got technically what most people consider the world record muskie. There's a lot of stories that float around that fish that it was actually caught by one of either Al Capone or one of Al Capone's like guys, and they could not register it because they were wanted. And the game wardens were always like chasing them, having shootouts in the Hayward, Wisconsin area. So I'd love to have like the full story as to whether there's any,
you will never know,
any connection between Al Capone and the world record muskie.
I had no idea. That's freaking cool. I didn't know about that. That's pretty.
It's like Wisconsin folklore.
Well, you can go up. Actually, Al Capone's house was for sale a few years ago. You can go up there, and they've got like gun turrets and like around the house in the garage. I mean, it was there's lots of there's a private lake on the property. They would fly bootleg Canadian whiskey in, fly it down, land it in the lake, and take it down. Like I growing up in Chicago, Al Capone's a big thing in Chicago, but there's a lot of gangster connections to the North Woods of Wisconsin as well.
Love it.
That's freaking crazy.
No wonder why Squatch is up there. Squatch.
Well, Matt, almost guaranteed Andy's wife Amanda is probably related to him some way. So you probably could just ask Andy. He'll get you a connection.
There's a good chance.
I won't ask any questions.
Scary.
Oh man,
I have no.
I just want the
questions.
fishy questions. Just the fishy questions.
That's really funny. But I mean, you never know. Like big Italian families, you just never know. Like the line, and yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like the family history on her side, it's wild. So there's a chance somewhere somebody is probably related.
Well, Matt, man, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we can do this again real soon.
Yeah, let me know whenever you want me on. I'll be more than happy to come on. I appreciate it, guys, and yeah, it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Heck yeah, dude. We'll be talking to you real soon.
Sounds good.
All right, Matt, take care.
See ya.
That was good. Loki, you want to talk Sasquatch more, but we'll let that rest. We'll let it rest for now.
Maybe Squatch is not just aliens, but maybe it's like the underground Italian mob still running wild, dressed as Squatch in Northwoods, Wisconsin.
It's just some punk kid who's like 7 feet tall in a town with a gorilla suit, just
trying to hide a size 17 feet.
Yeah, this is gonna be on Nat Geo next year. I low key, my dad and I loved that Finding Bigfoot show. Where we would just tease about it, but then my friends and I would straight up go camping that next weekend and do like the tree knocking stuff at night. Like we're total nerds. To be a kid again, man. It'd be incredible.
Have your ear up to it.
Well, did you ever watch that show?
I watched tidbits of it. I don't really remember it, but I do remember watching it. So,
dude, it was wild. We won't get into it. Well, we'll save it for if we end up making our Sasquatch show, and we'll tell people about it.
Perfect. After hours, serious angler. Great serious angler episode. Yeah, after hours.
We'll make it a premium members on YouTube. YouTube members. That's what we'll do. If you guys want to talk Bigfoot, we make ourselves sound like too much of lunatics, but for real though, that was an awesome episode with Matt, and especially talking the hover rig. I'll be very excited to watch him smack him on the hover rig on BPT Live next year. Looking forward to that. What I will do actually after this episode, I meant to add it in here. I have Matt's YouTube channel in the show notes of YouTube and MP3 at the moment, but what I'll do is actually include the Lure Lab episode as well, with Matt talking the hover rig specifically. If you guys want any more tidbits, and of course, if you want even more information, his YouTube channel is packed full of it. Highly encourage you guys to go check that out over there. But Andy, I'm about to sign off here. What can the folks know coming up, guide wise, anything along those lines to look forward to?
That's a great question. So, if anybody's looking for a last minute date on the water, I have next Wednesday and Friday available. And then after that, for the month of September and October, I think I have like 13 days total available. And my May and June next year are almost full. So if you want to get your date on the calendar, I would strongly suggest planning your trip now, because I'm starting to reach out to my clients from this past year, and they're all starting to take up those days. So if you want to get to Buffalo and catch some smallmouth, or hit up the Finger Lakes, catch some largemouth or smallmouth, the time to plan for 2024 is now. So before the days are filled.
Y'all heard him.
Yes.
Well, Andy, it was a lot of fun. Thank you again to Mr. Matt Stefan for joining us. That was an absolute pleasure.
Yes,
and guys, for Friday's episode, we will be having Mr. Jeff Queen on from One Queen Tackle, but also two from Master Cup Fishing, to talk about the new team trail that he has got going on starting this fall.
Oh, that's
pretty interesting deal.
So cool.
With legitimate, actual like monetary betting involved on it. So we're gonna break that all down. Super pumped that that's actually happening. It's the first time ever happening in fishing. I remember it was supposed to be a thing at MLF, and I don't know what happened with that. But regardless, it's gonna be a fun episode. That'll be for Friday, and then coming up next week. For next Tuesday Night Live, of course, next Monday is St. Lawrence Fantasy Fishing. It'll be our second to last fantasy fishing show of the year. And next Tuesday Night Live, we're having John Garrett on the show.
Oh, that'd be good one.
Who's sitting nice to try to qualify for the Elite Series next year.
Awesome.
But folks, appreciate y'all as always, and we'll see you on Friday.